Hello everybody, welcome to Modernized Wealth. My name is John Hebert, and I'd like to talk today about how various recessions affect the economy and affect you, and in particular, let's discuss current situation with the coronavirus, what kind of recession we have, and what are the prospects likely to be based on history. First thing I'd like to do is talk about the three types of recessions. The first one is typically what we call a structural recession. The second is a cyclical recession, and the third is an event-driven recession. So let's start with a structural recession. Typically, historically, we've seen those particularly in the 1800s and early 1900s, where you would have a large segment of the population affected by a significant long-term trend change. So the easiest way to think of one is to look at when society moved from an agrarian society towards the end of the 1800s to a full-fledged manufacturing-based economy. So people left the farms, they went to work in factories. That worker displacement that resulted from that meant that people had to go through significant periods of uncertainty in their employment. And as a result, you had recessions that would occur that would be shockingly deep. The second form of recession is a cyclical recession. A cyclical recession is more in line with what you saw after World War II. A recession of 1953, the recession of 1958, a recession back in 1968. And those recessions are typically more mild than you would find in a structural recession. They tend to occur when people get too optimistic, they spend too much money and borrow too much money, and unfortunately, at some point when the demand for goods and services falls, so does demand for employment, and people become unemployed, and you have a recession. Those tend to be milder, but they're not necessarily always terribly mild. The third kind of recession is an event-driven recession. Now, since World War II, there have been two major event-driven recessions prior to the one that we experienced currently. The first one was the Korean War, and the second one was the Second World War. Both at the end, when soldiers returned from the war, there was a large number of people increasing their employment. That resulted in large amounts of unemployment, and what happened is that the government intervened to provide funding so that these soldiers eventually found work, and they can be also typically lighter forms of recession. This one that we are living through now is essentially an event-driven recession. This event-driven recession is the result, obviously, of the virus. The characteristic of an event-driven recession is it's dominant in terms of the news cycle, it's dominant in terms of its impact, and it's dominant in the sense that it changes people's lives. So even when you look at 9/11, part of the length of the recession from the tech wreck in the early 2000s was exacerbated by 9/11 events and the post period where we went to war both in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So in this particular recession, when you have an events-driven recession, the market will anticipate when the issue becomes resolved. So the market will recover before the rest of the economy does. So we've seen some of that already. The market dropped roughly 33% from peak to trough in March 22nd of 2019, February 22nd of 2019 to March 23rd, and then we've had a 50% recovery since then. So mind you, we've had some recovery already, even though the effects of the disease will play out for a significantly longer period of time. The good news is that once the issue has been resolved, typically the economy rebounds fairly quickly at that point in time, and the market returns to the levels that it had previously seen. So we would hope, if all goes optimistic, that we would see a return to normal, hopefully in the late summer and early fall, or at latest towards the beginning of next year. The issues with these kinds of recessions are that they do have ripple effects. So for example, one of the issues that we've seen since the coronavirus became a recession creating event was the effect on energy markets. The effect also is on government spending, which is massive at the present time. And nobody's quite sure how that will resolve itself. So that could add to the timetable for recovery. How should you play this? One of the things that you're going to need to look at in your portfolios is what areas of the market are most significantly affected, not just in the short term, but in the long term as well. In other words, will the energy companies resume their growth rates? Will they resume to the levels that they were before? There's a good chance they may not, and there may be consolidation in that industry. So it's something to look for. So be careful when you're bottom fishing for ideas in the market to make money. Just because something is cheap doesn't mean you can't get caught in a value trap. Things can go down more. So you have to be properly allocated in the areas of the market that tend to benefit from this event. Things such as healthcare, biotechnology, and of course technology itself. So the last thing I want to make sure that we understand is that from a business perspective, from a business owner's perspective, obviously this economy will not fully recover until people are back to work and people re-emerge and engage in some of the behaviors that they had engaged in, or most of the behaviors that they engaged in prior to the crisis. There's all sorts of things that one who is a surviving business owner from this episode should take away. You should begin to really learn how to manage your cash flow. Look at your asset liability management to make sure that you're adequately funded for adverse events, that you have plenty of savings in both personal as well as business, that you streamline as much as possible your operation, and that you look for opportunities to enlarge in your business and become even more successful. Typically in these kinds of recessions, as in many others, some companies will not survive this, but others will thrive. So be the one that thrives, both in your personal life and in your business life. If you have any questions, please give us a call or contact us at modernizedwealth.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time.